Good morning, everyone. It's so nice to be here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Give me just a moment. There you go. I hope everyone can see that. I'm so happy to be here going over completing Social Security's work activity report forms with you all today. I'm going to be providing some information and details that should be helpful in assisting you to complete that process. A brief disclaimer, the material in this presentation has been prepared by the Social Security Administration's Public Affairs Office and is intended for educational purposes only. Participation in this presentation does not constitute an endorsement by the Social Security Administration or its employees of the organizations and information and products not provided by Social Security. Now here's an outline of what we'll be going over today. We'll go over what activity report forms are. That's the SSA 821 and the SSA 820. When and why we need to fill them out. We'll be going over the Red Book, and I'll briefly review some work incentives with you. And it's important here to understand when these work incentives are applicable and recognize where they're located on the work activity report form. We'll then go over how to fill out the SSA 821 and the SSA 820. I'll go over a few helpful publications, and we'll wrap it up with some questions that were previously submitted, and then open it up to some more questions. Now, what is a work activity report form? A work activity report form, that's the SSA 821 and SSA 820. The SSA 821 is for waged individuals who work for an employer and are provided with a W-2 at the end of the year. The SSA 820 is for self-employed individuals. Now, both of these forms are used to report work details, such as wage history and work information. A work review is then conducted by Social Security with that indication or report that a Social Security disability beneficiary is working. When do we need to fill out work activity report forms? Whenever there is a change in a Social Security disability beneficiary's work activity. So that change could be things like work stoppage, restarting work, a job change or position change, hours being reduced or increased, wage amount changing, that's a reduction or a decrease, as well as an increase, duties or responsibilities changing, that could be fewer duties or responsibilities or an increase in duties and responsibilities. What is also really important is work incentives, such as the trial work period, the extended period of eligibility, unsuccessful work attempts, impairment-related work expenses, and subsidies. It's important to report work incentives, know when they're applicable, and provide as much detail as you can. Now I'm going to go over some of those work incentives. All of the details that I'll be going over today are available in the Red Book, which is on our website, ssa.gov. The Red Book is a great resource. It's a guide to work incentives and employment. It goes into full detail and description of these work incentives, as well as examples of how they may apply. So with that, let's get started. We'll start with the trial work period, or TWP. When a Social Security disability beneficiary starts receiving benefits and starts working, they're eligible for a 9-month trial work period. And that is the point at which they can test their ability to work. There's no maximum cap of earnings on the trial work period month, but there is a minimum amount. And that minimum amount changes yearly. For this year, being 2024, that amount is $1,110 per month. So an individual would need to make that minimum amount in earnings to have a month qualify as a trial work period month. Now, the 9 months don't need to occur consecutively. They can occur over a rolling 60-month period. If they don't occur within those 60 months, the count restarts for that 9-month trial work period. Now, let's say a beneficiary continues working and has worked throughout those 9 months, and the 9-month trial work period is completed. The individual would then enter the extended period of eligibility, which is a 36-month consecutive period after the trial work period. During these 36 months, a beneficiary is eligible for Social Security benefits any month in which they are not working or earning below substantial gainful activity. At the same time, a beneficiary would not be eligible for benefits if they're working above substantial gainful activity levels. If an individual continues working beyond those 36 months, their benefits may stop. If an individual stops working or continues working below SGA, benefits would continue. I highlight the TWP and EPE because it's extremely important, especially important, to provide work activity changes and work activity information during this period of time. So we'll continue on with more work incentives that are important to be aware of. The unsuccessful work attempt, or UWA. The UWA is an effort to do substantial work that discontinues or reduces to below substantial gainful activity levels after a short time. That short time cannot exceed 6 months. And it stops or reduces due to an impairment or the removal of special conditions that are related to that impairment. Averaging. Averaging can apply over a period of work when, one, the person's work was or is continuous, and there's no significant change in work patterns or earnings, and there's no change in substantial gainful activity earnings levels. Moving on to impairment-related work expenses, or IRWIs. IRWIs are the costs of certain impairment-related items and services that are needed to work, which may be excluded when determining countable income. There are requirements to be counted as an IRWI. 1, the item or service enables you to work. 2, you need the item or service because of a physical or mental impairment. 3, you pay for the item or service and are not reimbursed by another source, such as Medicare, Medi-Cal, or another insurance provider. 4, the cost is reasonable and represents the standards for that item or service in your community. Now, there are some examples of IRWIs, which can include things like transportation costs, prescription drugs, service animals, residential modifications, medical devices, prostheses, attendant care services, and many more. Subsidies and special conditions. Subsidies are supports that are provided by your employer that may result in you receiving more pay than the actual value of the services that you perform. For example, this could be sheltered employment provided for individuals with disabilities in a protected environment under an institutional program. Special conditions. Special conditions are support and on-the-job assistance provided by your employer or someone other than your employer, such as a job coach through a vocational rehabilitation agency. Now, how can you tell if a subsidy or a special condition applies to you? If you receive more supervision than other workers doing a similar job for a similar pay. If you have fewer or simpler tasks than someone doing a similar job for the same pay. If you're given additional or longer breaks than others doing the same job for the same pay. Or if you have a job coach or a mentor who helps you to perform some of the work, then a special condition or a subsidy may apply. Now, the reason I went through all of those work incentives was just to make sure that everyone is aware that it is important that we address those work incentives in these work activity report forms. Sometimes they are missed, and so we want to go ahead and recognize and highlight where we fill out information concerning those work incentives as well as work activity changes on these forms. So I'll start with the SSA 821, and we'll go ahead and go through that form. Again, the 821 is a work activity report form for a waged employee who has an employer and receives a W-2 at the end of the year for their earnings. Now, the 821 can be found on our website. It can be filled out electronically and submitted online. It can also be submitted in person to the local office or via fax or mail. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the form. Okay, so I hope everyone can see my screen. This is the SSA 821 Work Activity Report form. I'll scroll down. The first 2 pages are actually to be filled out by the field office. They're not to be filled out by the individual who's receiving benefits and working. So we'll go ahead and skip the first 2 pages. The 3rd page and onward are to be filled out by the beneficiary who is working. Now, the top portion of this form can be filled out by the office if they're providing you with the form to complete and return, but in most cases it's not. So you would definitely want to fill out the information beginning at the top of this page and until the very end of the form. So name of claimant or beneficiary, your name, indicate whether blind or not blind applies. And then the BNC number is usually a notice number that comes on a letter that you're sent in the mail. So you may not have that. And so don't worry about the BNC number. You can go ahead and scratch that out and provide your social security number instead. Scrolling down, please use this form to describe your work activity since it would be insert alleged onset date or date of entitlement. So this date is basically the first point at which your condition started affecting your ability to work. So the date during which your conditions were affecting you and you stopped working. It could be a month and a year or even a year that you provide in this space. Now, these are details from this portion going downward. These are details that we want to fill out to the best of our ability as comprehensively as possible. So question 1, have you had any employment, income, or wages since the date shown above? And that was the disability onset date that we had just gone over. So since that date, if you have had active work, you would go ahead and check mark yes and go down to question 3, skipping question number 2. If it's a no, and there was some income that was reported for you, but it wasn't necessarily active income, it was maybe passive income, you can go ahead and check mark no and answer question number 2. So to go through question number 2, you're basically answering what that income was for. Was it back pay, vacation pay, holiday pay, bonus or commission, royalties or sick pay, disability pay, etc. And you would be putting the name and address of the payer who provided you with that payment, as well as the amount received and the frequency at which it was received. You'd also include the dates that you worked and received that passive payment for, if there were dates in the past. That is section number 2. And so if we scroll down to section number 3, question number 3, that's 3A through 3C. These are questions about your current work or prior work. And this is income from active work, not passive. So in section 3A, you would be telling us about your work since that disabling onset date. So here would be your current or most recent employer's name, supervisor's name, supervisor's telephone number, a mailing address, job title and type of work, the date that work started, the date that work ended, if that's applicable, or check marking if you're still working. Your rate of pay and the frequency at which that pay is received, whether it's hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, that would go here. And then the hours worked per week on average. You can attach copies of your pay stubs, or you can ask your employer for a wage printout showing gross monthly earnings. And if you are attaching and including that information, you can check mark the first box for I have enclosed pay stubs or gross wage printout. If not, you can check mark I do not have pay stubs or gross wage printout, and you would need to then estimate and provide that information below. So the dates for which it's earned, month and year, the amount, and you can go as far back as you'd like. If this is not enough space, you can go ahead and include that information in the remarks section. We do want to see as much information as you can provide. So don't feel like you're limited to this space only. Question 3B. If you do not have any more employers, go to question 4. So if there are more employers, since you're disabling onset date, you would go ahead and fill out that information under 3B and 3C, and it's the same information. Employer's name, supervisor's name, telephone number, mailing address, job title, type of work, the dates that you're working, rate of pay, and then again, the pay stubs or gross wage printout. Now scrolling down to question number 4, do or did you get any other payments or benefits for an employer in addition to the regular pay shown in question number 3? If that's a no, you can skip this question. If it's a yes, you would need to indicate what kind of payment was received, and that's in addition to your regular pay, whether it was sick pay, disability pay, vacation pay, tips, bonus, transportation, car, vehicle, etc. This is space for you to go ahead and indicate what that payment was for and explain. So you would indicate the type of payment in this column, and then the employer's name, the employer who provided that payment, the amount, and the frequency at which the payment was received. The dates that it was received for. And if you need more room, you can always include that information in remarks. Scrolling down to question number 5. For any jobs that you told us about in question 3, have you worked under any special conditions listed below? So this is extremely important. This is the work incentive that we went over, and this is where you want to indicate that information. You would check mark any special condition that applies for you, whether that's having extra supervision, extra help, or a job coach, working irregular or fewer hours than other workers, receiving special equipment because of conditions, taking more rest periods, special transportation, fewer or easier duties than others, being hired through a special training or therapy program, or being given work that's duties or responsibilities that are specifically suited to your condition. Special help, getting ready for work, or other special conditions that may apply in your specific case. You would go ahead and check mark that box on the left side column and indicate the employer who's providing you with that special condition, the dates for which that special condition is being received, and then a brief description on the right side of that special condition. Now, to go into the description a bit, I think that may be a bit vague. So for example, had extra help, extra supervision, or a job coach. If that special condition applies to you, the description section would include something like what kind of help was received, what kind of supervision, what you received coaching for, how often or how frequently that extra help, supervision, or coaching was received. If you worked irregular or fewer hours than others, you can describe how many hours you worked versus a regular workday for another worker. If you're given special equipment, you would describe what kind of equipment and why it may be needed. If you take more rest periods than other workers, you can describe how many rest periods. For example, 3 20-minute breaks or rest periods versus one regular 20-minute break for the other worker, and so on. So a brief description is always helpful when providing the indication that you have a special condition, for your impairment. Now scrolling down to section 6A. For any job that you told us about in question 3, did you make any of the changes below since that disabling onset date? And again, this is special conditions that are continuing. it's not only special conditions, it's the potential for an unsuccessful work attempt or a subsidy that can be indicated here as well. So whether you stopped working, reduced your work hours, reduced earnings, changed to a lighter or easier type of work, you would go ahead and indicate which employer that occurred with, the date that that occurred, and then the reasons for changes in that work activity, whether it's your conditions or the special conditions that were removed that were allowing you to work, or other reasons. And if you do indicate other reasons, you would definitely need to go ahead and explain in section 6B or describe what caused that change. Scrolling down to question 7, do or did you spend any of your own money for items or services related to your physical or mental impairment that you needed in order to work and for which you did not get reimbursed? For example, medicines, co-pays, medical devices, procedures, braille equipment, special telephone or equipment, service animal attendant care, etc. So these are your impairment-related work expenses or IRWs. And it's important here to provide as much information as you can so that, Social Security has as much information when they are making a work evaluation for you. If it's a no, you can skip this section. If it's a yes, please tell us what you paid below. So that would be describing the item or service, the cost that you paid, and the frequency at which that was paid. If it was, for example, prescription drugs, if it was $20 every month or whatever frequency for whatever that service was is important here. And then the date for which you paid for that item or service on the right side. Again, there is a remark section, which I don't believe is entirely used most of the time and can definitely be used to provide more information about the questions that are asked in the form, as well as providing any other information or detail that you think is applicable in your specific case. Any information that you think would assist Social Security in making that work evaluation for you. Whether it's work activity changes, more information about your specific work or job, or more information on your work incentives or other things that you think may apply, you would go ahead and indicate that in the remarks section. At the bottom, we have signature, date, address, and phone number. And that is the SSA 821. There is an extra page for additional employment information if you have more employers from question number 3. I think there is enough space for another 4 employers and employment information. Okay, so having gone over the SSA 821, I'm going to go back to the presentation and just briefly go over self-employment with you before going over the SSA 820. So self-employment is evaluated differently in terms of substantial gainful activity. For employed individuals, we look at a certain monthly amount that you're making, whether you make below or above that substantial gainful activity earnings amount. For self-employment, there are actually 3 tests. Those 3 tests, all 3 tests, need to be evaluated before we can determine whether you are working and earning at substantial gainful activity levels or not. Now, I'm going to go over those 3 tests. Test 1 is significant services and substantial income. That is net earnings from self-employment, or NESE. Now, NESE is determined by your gross earnings less your business expenses. Business expenses or business deductions can be things like unpaid help, impairment-related work expenses or IRWs, unincurred business expenses, etc. So that's test 1, your net earnings. Test 2 is the comparability of work activity. The hours, duties, responsibilities of a beneficiary compared to those of an unimpaired individual in a comparable position. Test 3 is the worth of work activity. Now that is ownership shares. and management decisions. Do you own 100% of your business, or do you share that ownership? Do you make all management decisions for your business, or do you share that responsibility with others? Are others involved in making management decisions for the business? So it's important to understand that these three tests are on the SSA 820 to recognize where they're located and what kind of information you should be providing that addresses these three tests, along with the work incentive. So I'll go ahead and pull up the SSA 820. Just like the SSA 821, the first two pages are usually filled out by the field office. So you can start with page 3. Page 3 and onward would need to be filled out by the individual who's receiving the disability benefit and working. So again, the top portion may not be filled out by the office, and so you would need to go ahead and fill out your name, indicate whether blind or not blind applies. Do not worry about the BNC number. Again, here you would be providing your Social Security number. And again, we have that disability onset date, that date at which you first stopped working due to your conditions affecting your ability to work. Now, question 1, have you had any self-employment since that date? And this is similar to the first question in the SSA 821. If it's a no and you've had some passive income reported for you, you can go ahead and answer question 2 for that passive income. If it's a yes, you have had active work and earnings, then you're going to skip question 2 and go down to question 3. So question 2 again is for that passive income. The passive income information you would be providing is the self-employment description at the time that you receive the income. The name and address of the payer, the payment or estimate of value that you received, and the frequency at which it was received. Daily, weekly, monthly, whatever applies. And the dates for which you worked, which again may have been a date in the past for which you're receiving a payment at a later point. If you did not have passive income and you actually are working, you are self-employed and working, you would skip down to question number 3 and answer this information or these questions. So the type of self-employment, the name or the business, the name of the business, the area code and phone number, the fax number, mailing address, and then what is the primary product or service that you provide from your business? The date that that work started and the date that that work ended, if it has ended. If it has not ended, then you would indicate that you're still working and provide an average number of hours worked per month. If you notice for self-employment, we don't look at the average number of hours worked per week. We look at the average number of hours worked per month. Now, this is actually test number 3 that we went over, the type of ownership arrangement. Are you a sole owner? Is the business a corporation, an LLC, a partnership? Are you an independent contractor, etc.? So here you would go ahead and indicate what is applicable in your case for your specific self-employment business. Question number 4. In the space below, show each month you worked in your business, the net earnings, and if you worked 45 hours or more. Now this is test 1, where you are stating the dates that you worked, so that's the month and the year, the net earnings from your self-employment or NESI, and then you're indicating whether you've worked more than 45 hours per month or not. And again, you can use this entire space. If you need to continue on, you can do that in the remarks section. Question number 5, please attach all of your self-employment tax returns, including the Schedule C and SE or 1099, since the disabling onset date. So again, you would check mark that you have enclosed your tax returns if you're able to. If not, you can check mark, I do not have tax returns. And for any years that you don't have tax returns, you can go ahead and estimate that information. The year, the gross earnings that you had for that year, and the net. If this is not enough space, you can continue on into the remark section. Question 6, has anyone besides yourself had management responsibilities for this business, i.e. a partner, an employee, a relative, a helper, since that disabling onset date? This is test 3 of self-employment. So management responsibilities. Do you share in management responsibilities? Are you doing that by yourself, or do you do it with others? If it's a no, you can skip this question and go down to question 7. If it's a yes, you are sharing management responsibilities and decision-making with others. Then you would need to go ahead and indicate how many hours per month on average does or did the other person spend on management duties. So the hours per month for the other individual or individuals included in your management decision-making and responsibilities, as well as the number of hours per month on average that you spend on management decision-making and responsibilities. And again, that's hours per month, not hours per week. There is a section to describe what duties you perform versus duties that the other person or people involved perform. So what kind of decision-making do you do? What kind of responsibilities do you have in the business compared to the other person or people involved? If you can provide as much description and detail in this section as possible, that definitely helps in understanding how involved you are in your self-employment business and how much work you're able to do. Question 7. Since the date shown in the identification section, did you make any changes in your work activity due to your physical or mental condition? And here is where we're mentioning special conditions, unsuccessful work attempts, etc. This is where work incentives come in. If it's a no, you can skip this question and go down to question 8. If it's a yes, we would go ahead and indicate all that apply, the changes that apply, whether that's stopping work, reducing your work hours, changing to lighter or easier work, or other changes that have occurred. You would indicate the date that they occurred and explain, provide a brief description again about the type of change and why it occurred. In the reduced your work hours section, it's specifically being asked what your hours were reduced from to and why. So you want to provide that detailed description there. Question 8. Has any person or organization contributed to or paid for any business expenses or provided any free help, items, or services related to your business since your disabling onset date? These are special conditions and subsidies as well. So if it's a no, you can skip this question. If it's a yes, you're going to want to describe the expenses paid and the items or services that were provided, the value of their contribution to your work, and who it was that provided those items or services. Again, as much detail as you can provide in this section is great. We want more information here. Question 9. Do or did you spend any of your own money for items or services related to your physical and/or mental conditions? These are your impairment-related work expenses, again, your IRWIs. If it's a no, you can skip this section. If it's a yes, you need to tell us what you paid in the section below. You would describe the item or service, the cost that you paid, and the frequency at which that was paid. The date that you made that payment. And if this section is not enough, you can include it, more information in remarks. So we have enough space in terms of remarks for you to include as much detail as possible, and that is what we're looking for. As we scroll down, again, there's the signature section, signature, date, phone number, address. And that's it for the SSA 820. Go back to the presentation. So much like the SSA 821, the 820 can be found on our website. It can be filled out electronically and submitted online. The hard copy can also be filled out and submitted to the local office or submitted via fax or mail. To circle back to the Red Book. The Red Book goes through all of this work information and much, much more. It's a great planning resource and tool for you to be able to understand how your work, your current work, or your future plans for work will affect your Social Security benefits in the short and the long term, so that you can plan monetarily for your benefits as well as your Medicare or Medi-Cal. Now, the Red Book is available again on our website. That's socialsecurity.gov or ssa.gov. And our website is a great resource in terms of tools and information. Scrolling down on the home page, on the bottom left, you'll find publications. When you click on publications, it will take you to a wealth of resources that are available. And these publications are available in audio format, some in audio format, all in PDF format, and some are available in other languages. When you type in the search box, you can go ahead and type in self for self-employment or working while disabled, and a bunch of literature or publications will come up. That will definitely provide you with detailed information to fill out work activity report forms or get more information on work incentives, etc. Now, how do you report your wages? Wages can be reported via phone, in person, by mail or fax. They can also be reported online via our website, ssa.gov, by creating a MySSA account. When you create a MySSA account, you would initially need to go into the local office to provide your employment information. So details like the name of the employer that you work for, when you started work, if you're continuing to work, an EIN number for the employer. And once that information is provided to the office, they'll go ahead and add that employment, or if it's multiple employers, all employers' information on your online account, so that you can go in monthly and enter your wage information on your own. And you will receive a receipt for that as well. You'll find tips like these and many others on all of our social media if you follow at Social Security. And our last disclaimer, the information is current in this presentation at the time of the presentation, but Social Security policy is subject to change. So please visit ssa.gov for up-to-date information on all of our programs. Now, there were questions that were submitted to us previously, and I wanted to go through and address some of these, or all of these questions, and then we'll go ahead and open it up to more. So question number 1, does the question regarding sick and vacation pay on the SSA 821 or 820 mean any sick or vacation days taken since an individual started working? This is a good question because sick and vacation pay means an actual payment that you received, and this is separated from the normal or regular pay that you receive on the pay stubs that you get. If a separate amount is indicated under sick or vacation pay, you want to go ahead and provide that information and that pay stub. And it's not necessarily since you started working, but it is since that disabling onset date. So when you stopped working due to your conditions and then restarted work since that date. Question number 2, if a consumer receives job coaching support, what information are you looking for in the description section? Also, is DOR or a community partner providing job development considered hired through special training or therapy program? And we kind of went over this in terms of what kind of descriptions we're looking for. So if it's job coaching support, you would want to mention what kind of support you're receiving, how you're receiving assistance, what kind of help you're receiving, the frequency at which that support is being received, that kind of information. And DOR or a community partner providing job development is considered being hired through special training or a therapy program. You would just need to indicate that. Question 3. What kind of information can be provided in the Please Describe section on the Special Conditions page? Like how many rest periods compared to other workers, productivity level compared to unimpaired workers, etc. And we did go over this as well, but yes, you want to be specific with your examples. You can be brief, but being specific helps. So I receive 3 rest periods versus 1 rest period that other workers receive who are unimpaired. Question 4. Should receipts be included with the work activity report in terms of, we may ask you for proof of payment? I would say no. If a receipt is needed, a claims specialist from the local field office should be reaching out to you with an idea of what specifically they're looking for, which receipt, which proof of payment for what indication on the work activity report. So I would not provide extra information aside from what is being asked in the work activity report unless the local office reaches out to you to request more information, proof, or further details. Question 5. What are the most common mistakes when filling out a work activity report? This is a really great question. I think that not enough detail is provided when it comes to work incentives. It's common that an individual receiving disability benefits may not be aware of the specific work incentives that are applicable in their case. And it's important to be aware, to refer to that red book or any other publication that is helpful for you in describing those work incentives so that you can understand what is applicable in your specific case and provide Social Security with details and information on those work incentives that apply for you, so that when Social Security is making that SGA determination and evaluating for your work, we have as much information as possible. So it's really an understanding of the work incentives that apply in your case and providing that information to us in a timely manner. Question number 6. If an individual does not have the records or pay stubs for the requested period of time, what is the best approach in documenting the information or the best way to proceed? So it's not expected that you will have a record or a pay stub in every scenario. It's great if you do. It's very helpful. But if that's not available to you, you can always estimate the information and sign the form. That is sufficient, that will suffice for providing the information that we need. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and say thank you and open it up to questions, the 821 or the 820 if we need it.
All right, Kanika, thank you so much. This has been so informative. We really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and sticking around for quite a few questions. I think the information that you've provided has been really helpful. Your tips for completing the work activity report form, I think, really help to streamline the information our beneficiaries understand that they need to gather to help them fill out the form, and really helps them to take that next step. When they complete the form, it's going to be a little less stressful, right? You're going to be familiar with what it is Social Security is looking for and why they're going to be using the information they're requesting on the form. And ultimately, it really is to help identify ways to help support you in your work activity.